말도 You are surrounded by people whose thinking constantly tests your patience, and it is exhausting. You may believe your intelligence is your greatest strength. At times, it can also become your greatest vulnerability. Modern culture often encourages you to educate everyone, rely on logic, and always search for common ground. Schopenhauer, however, recognized a harsher reality: reason alone cannot persuade someone who has no interest in reasoning. Martin's nuance short. Explaining yourself to a person who refuses to think critically is rarely an act of wisdom. More often, it becomes an unnecessary drain on your time and energy. Throughout history, many great strategists understood that the most effective way to deal with willful ignorance was not to win every argument, but to choose carefully which battles deserved their attention. Once you understand that principle, you stop allowing every misguided opinion to disturb your peace. Sad, you know the feeling. You are sitting in a meeting around a family dinner table or scrolling through an online discussion, listening to someone speak with complete confidence about a subject they barely understand. You immediately recognize the flaws in their reasoning. Your mind begins assembling evidence, connecting facts, and preparing the perfect response. You present your case as clearly and logically as you can, expecting reason to settle the disagreement. Instead, they simply look back at you, pause for a moment, and repeat the very same claim with even greater certainty. You walk away mentally exhausted, wondering how a conversation filled with facts could leave you feeling as though nothing changed at all. Why does this happen? Why do you lose when you are objectively right? Because you are suffering from the intelligence trap. You are projecting your own operating system onto a machine that cannot run it. Intelligent people operate under a fatal delusion: the belief that the rest of the world values the truth. Then, you assume that if you just present the right evidence, the other person will analyze it, adjust their worldview, and agree. Schopenhauer despised this naive optimism. In his blistering text, The Art of Being Right, he observed a dark, unyielding law of human nature. People do not argue to find the truth. They argue to establish dominance. Psychology calls it the Dunning-Kruger effect, the cognitive bias where people with low ability possess a hallucinatory level of confidence. But understanding the graph is not enough. You must understand the gravity of it. Ignorance is not a passive state. It is an active, heavily armored defense mechanism. When you introduce logic to a fool, they do not see an opportunity to learn. They see a threat to their ego, and the human ego will burn down the entire world before it admits it is wrong. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, divided the mind into System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, emotional, and instinctual. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and logical. Stupid people are prisoners of System 1. They live there. They feel an emotion, attach a fast opinion to it, and call it a fact. You, the intelligent person, are trying to use System 2 on them. You are offering nuance. You are offering data. It is a translation error. You are speaking mathematics to a barking dog. Worse, you are doing all the work. You are spending immense caloric energy crafting a perfectly reasoned argument, while they are spending zero energy simply refusing to accept it. They drain you not by outsmarting you, but by outlasting you. They drag you down into the mud of their own cognitive limitations. Schopenhauer recognized this 2 centuries ago. He realized that truth has absolutely no currency in a debate with a fool. So what do you do if logic fails and reasoning is a trap? How do you win? You don't fight them. You weaponize their own momentum. Schopenhauer believed that the intellect often serves the will rather than governs it. The will, the emotional, instinctive, and deeply irrational side of human nature, frequently shapes what people choose to believe. When you argue with someone who has no genuine interest in truth, you often give them exactly what they want: resistance. And resistance makes them feel significant. Your frustration becomes evidence in their mind that they matter. Every time you rush to dismantle their argument, you unintentionally elevate it by treating it as worthy of your time and emotional energy. One of the most effective strategies is surprisingly simple: Stop feeding the conflict. Instead of immediately disagreeing, refuse to become emotionally invested in a battle that cannot be won through logic alone. Sometimes, the most revealing response is to agree so completely that the argument exposes its own weakness. In philosophy, this resembles reductio ad absurdum, following an idea to its logical extreme until its contradictions become impossible to ignore. Rather than attacking the person, you allow the reasoning to collapse under its own weight. Imagine a colleague insisting that all modern art is meaningless and that anyone could paint a masterpiece. Your instinct may be to lecture them about technique, history, and artistic expression. Instead, remain calm. Smile and say, "You might be right. If it's really that simple, perhaps we should both quit our jobs today. We'll buy some paint this afternoon, you create the masterpieces, and I'll start contacting the galleries." Sometimes a calm exaggeration reveals more than a heated debate ever could. We will be millionaires by Friday. Why are we even sitting in this office? Watch their eyes. You have not attacked them. You have completely validated their premise, but you have accelerated it to its logical, catastrophic conclusion. The fool operates on the surface. They never think 3 steps ahead. When you force them to look at the destination of their own thought process, their brain short-circuits. They have to backpedal. They have to inject nuance. They have to suddenly start arguing against themselves to save face. You did not defeat them with your logic. You defeated them with their own stupidity. Schopenhauer employed this mercilessly against his academic rivals. He did not engage in polite discourse with people he considered charlatans. He did not treat their ideas as equals. He magnified their flaws until the flaws became comical. When you do this, you protect your own energy. You step out of this ring. You become the observer watching a child trip over their own shoelaces. But this requires a terrifying shift in your own psychology. You must kill the part of your ego that desperately wants to be recognized as right. Intelligent people are addicted to being correct. You want the satisfaction of the other person conceding. You want the moral victory. Schopenhauer would tell you that seeking validation from a fool is the ultimate form of stupidity. Why do you care if a lesser mind acknowledges your brilliance? Why do you need a blind man to compliment your painting? When you drop the need to be right in their eyes, you become immune to their provocations. Monsieur? You stop giving them the remote control to your nervous system. Let them hold their incorrect beliefs. Let them walk into the world with their flawed maps. It is not your duty to save them. It is your duty to protect yourself from them. Which brings us to a darker, more necessary realization. Stupidity is not a passive trait. It is highly contagious. Bad. If you spend enough time trying to navigate the chaotic, irrational landscape of a foolish person's mind, you will begin to compromise your own. Cognitive load theory explains that our mental bandwidth is strictly limited. When you interact with a highly irrational person, your brain works overtime. You find yourself trying to predict unpredictable reactions. You suppress your own frustration. You walk on eggshells, carefully measuring every word. Over time, that constant mental strain begins to drain your own judgment. Your patience grows thinner. Your decisions become less thoughtful. Your creativity fades. Without realizing it, you allow someone else's chaos to consume your mental energy. Schopenhauer was famously solitary. Many described him as a misanthrope, believing he despised humanity. Yet in The Wisdom of Life, a different picture emerges. His concern was not hatred of people, but the protection of mental clarity. He approached relationships with the same uncompromising logic he applied to philosophy, believing that your inner peace should never be sacrificed carelessly. His famous porcupine dilemma illustrates this idea. On a freezing winter night, porcupines move closer together for warmth only to wound each other with their quills. They repeatedly draw near and pull away, searching for a distance that offers both comfort and protection. Human relationships often follow the same pattern. Complete isolation is unhealthy, but unlimited closeness can become equally damaging. Wisdom lies in finding the right distance. You cannot avoid every difficult person. They may be your manager, a client, a neighbor, or even a member of your own family. But you can establish healthy psychological boundaries. When interaction is necessary, you do not need to expose every thought, every emotion, or every part of your identity. You remain courteous, composed, and deliberate, protecting your peace without surrendering your authenticity. The avatar is polite. The avatar smiles. The avatar speaks in short, agreeable sentences. Interesting perspective. I see what you mean. That's one way to look at it. The avatar gives them nothing to attack. The avatar is a mirror reflecting their own noise back at them, while your actual mind remains protected behind a fortress of detachment. While this is the Machiavellian application of Schopenhauer's philosophy, you are physically present, but intellectually absent. They will think they are having a conversation with you. They will think they are winning. Let them. The illusion of victory is the cheapest toy you can give a fool to keep them quiet. Do you feel the guilt rising, the societal conditioning telling you that this is manipulative, that it is arrogant to view others this way? Kill that guilt. That guilt is exactly why you have been suffering. You have been treating intellectual predators like fragile victims. A foolish person who aggressively insists on their own ignorance is not innocent, but they are a hazard. David Robson in The Intelligence Trap details how institutional stupidity, smart people following the confident, incorrect herd, has caused plane crashes, economic collapses, and medical disasters. Stupidity is dangerous. You do not owe it your vulnerability. You do not owe it your energy. You must view their ignorance as a force of nature. You do not argue with a hurricane. You do not try to educate a flood. You board up the windows. You seek high ground, and you let the storm exhaust itself. But what happens when the fool has power over you? What happens when the irrational mind signs your paycheck or holds the key to your promotion? How do you survive when the system itself rewards the loudest idiot in the room? This requires an entirely different set of weapons. The most dangerous animal is not the predator. It is the frightened beast with a crown. When a person of low intellect acquires power, their entire psychological architecture is built on a fault line of deep, unacknowledged insecurity. They sense on a primal level that they are outmatched by the minds around them. Benton. They rarely experience your competence as an invitation to learn. Instead, they may experience it as a threat to their status. If you enter someone's domain and immediately display your brilliance, you are not always earning their respect. Sometimes you are unintentionally forcing them to confront their own insecurity. And a person who feels threatened by comparison may attack the messenger instead of considering the message. Schopenhauer wrote that displaying exceptional intelligence or outstanding ability in the presence of mediocrity can provoke resentment rather than admiration. People who define their self-worth through status often find excellence uncomfortable because it exposes the gap between who they are and who they wish they were. That discomfort can quietly turn into hostility. And rarely will they attack your intelligence directly. More often they question your character. Suddenly, you are described as difficult, arrogant, uncooperative, or not a team player. Rather than debating your ideas, they shift attention to your personality. In environments where hierarchy matters more than truth, winning every argument is rarely the winning strategy. The wiser approach is to understand the dynamics of power before deciding how to act. More. History offers many examples of this principle. During the era of the Three Kingdoms, Sima Yi served under the regent Cao Shuang, whose authority often exceeded his judgment. Sima Yi understood that confronting power head-on would likely end in failure. Instead of relying solely on intelligence, he exercised patience, restraint, and careful timing, demonstrating that strategy often succeeds where open confrontation cannot. If Sima Yi challenged him, he and his entire bloodline would be executed. If he argued, he would be crushed. So Sima Yi executed the most humiliating and effective strategy in the history of warfare, the submission gambit. He faked senility. When Cao Shuang's spies came to check on him, Sima Yi acted the part of a dying, pathetic old man.
他信
He purposely dropped his soup, letting it spill down his robes. He pretended he could not hear. He confused names. He looked entirely broken. The spy reported back to Cao Shuang. The foolish regent laughed. He felt superior. He felt safe. He stopped viewing Sima Yi as a threat and lowered his defenses. The fool's ego was satisfied. Months later, while Cao Shuang was out on a hunting trip, Sima Yi dropped the act. He rose from his sickbed, orchestrated a lightning-fast military coup, and seized the entire empire. Cao Shuang lost his head because he believed the illusion. Sima Yi understood something you must learn today. Your intelligence is not a badge you wear on your chest. It is a concealed weapon. You do not draw a concealed weapon to show off. You keep it hidden until the exact moment it is required. When dealing with a powerful fool, feed them the exact emotion they are starving for. Superiority. Ketkin, ask them for advice on trivial matters. Let them correct you on minor, irrelevant details. Thank them for their insight. You are not submitting. You are anesthetizing them. You are injecting their ego with a narcotic so heavy they fall asleep at the wheel, leaving you free to operate in the shadows. You trade a momentary scratch to your pride for absolute unhindered maneuverability. There is a specific type of exhaustion that comes from trying to translate complex reality for a simplistic mind. You draw diagrams. You use analogies. You break the concept down into its smallest atomic parts, and they still stare at you, their eyes completely blank, before repeating the exact same flawed argument they made 20 minutes ago. This is the core of the intelligence trap. You assume their inability to understand is a failure of your explanation. It is not. It is a failure of their hardware. David Robson's research on cognitive bias reveals a chilling reality. Highly intelligent people are uniquely vulnerable to a specific error, the belief that everyone else processes information the same way they do.
more
You think in probabilities. You weigh evidence. You revise your conclusions when new information appears. A person who is closed to reason often approaches the world very differently. They reach a conclusion first, frequently driven by emotion, identity, or group loyalty, and then dismiss anything that challenges it. Trying to force nuance into that mindset is often a losing battle. It is like asking a tool to perform a function it was never designed to handle. The problem is not always a lack of information. It is a refusal to examine deeply held assumptions. Recognizing that difference can save you enormous amounts of time and emotional energy. Schopenhauer argued that not every argument deserves an educational response because some opponents are committed to winning rather than understanding. One technique he discusses is the careful use of irony. When someone insists that you accept an obviously unreasonable premise, direct confrontation is not always the most effective response. Sometimes quiet restraint accomplishes more than a heated debate. You might calmly say, "Your proposal is so extraordinary that it goes far beyond my own understanding. I will have to defer to your judgment."
Bene
Someone determined only to feel superior may interpret those words as a victory. Meanwhile, thoughtful observers will recognize the subtle irony without you raising your voice or prolonging a pointless argument. The goal is not to humiliate another person. It is to avoid becoming trapped in a conflict where reason has already left the room, allowing you to preserve your composure instead of sacrificing it to an unwinnable debate.
tam
You have safely exited the conversation without expending a single calorie of intellectual energy. You must understand the economics of attention. Every hour you spend debating a fool is an hour stolen from your own empire. It is energy diverted from your wealth, your health, your actual goals. Fools are energy vampires. They do not produce. They consume. They drag you into endless circular debates because they have nothing better to do with their time. Your time is expensive, theirs is worthless. When you engage, you are trading gold for dirt. Cut the transaction, walk away. Now, let them believe they won. The lion does not lose sleep over the opinions of sheep, and the architect does not weep when the demolition crew calls his blueprints confusing. We need to address the darkest part of your psychology, the reason you keep engaging with them. It is not just because you want to be right.
Timmerman, Budamai,
It is because you feel sorry for them. You think, if I can just make them see the truth, their life will improve. If I can just show them the flaw in their logic, they won't make this terrible mistake. This is the arrogance of empathy. You believe you are the savior of the ignorant. You are playing God with someone else's cognitive limitations.
Banka,
Injin, this is a dangerous, bleeding heart philosophy that will drag you to the bottom of the ocean. Kruger and Dunning's landmark 1999 study revealed the cruelest joke of human psychology. The very skills required to be competent at a task are the exact same skills required to recognize competence. Therefore, the profoundly incompetent lack the metacognition to even realize they are incompetent.
Digison, Mad,
They are trapped in a fortress of unearned confidence, completely blind to their own deficits. You cannot save them. They do not want to be saved. They enjoy the fortress. It is warm inside. It protects them from the terrifying complexity of the real world. When you try to forcefully drag them into the harsh light of truth, you are not acting as a healer. You are acting as an invader, and they will fight you with the ferocity of a wild animal defending its territory.
Yamai,
Think about the people in your life. The friend who is always struggling financially, yet refuses to change their habits while passionately debating the economy, or the family member who creates constant drama while insisting everyone else is the problem. How many years have you spent trying to reason with them? How many nights have you lost replaying conversations in your head? They may not have changed at all, but you have become more exhausted, more frustrated, and more cynical in the process. And Schopenhauer took a very hard view of human nature. He believed that deep character traits are remarkably resistant to change. Whether or not one agrees with that conclusion, there is an important lesson hidden inside it. You cannot force growth upon someone who has no desire to grow. Accepting that can be painful, especially when the person is someone you care about. Sometimes, wisdom is not trying to remake people, but learning how to relate to them realistically. You stop treating every conversation as a rescue mission. You stop believing that one perfect explanation will suddenly transform their behavior. Instead, you set boundaries, adjust your expectations, and protect your own peace. Difficult people are often managed more effectively through distance and clarity than through endless attempts at correction. And something interesting happens when you stop fighting every battle, when you stop explaining yourself repeatedly. Stop trying to win every argument and begin observing instead of reacting. Your energy returns. You become less emotionally entangled in other people's chaos. The world does not necessarily change, but your relationship to it does. That shift can feel unsettling at first, but it is often the beginning of a much calmer and more deliberate way of living. You realize how much of your identity was wrapped up in being the smartest person in the room. You realize how much you relied on the friction of debating fools to feel alive. When you take that away, you are left with yourself. This is where the true test begins. Most intelligent people surround themselves with lesser minds intentionally.
Called,
They do it because it is safe. It is easy to look like a genius when you are surrounded by idiots. It is a psychological crutch. But Schopenhauer warned that a man of high intellect who fraternizes with the vulgar will eventually be dragged down to their level. The mind adapts to its environment. If you spend your days arguing about trivialities, your mind will become trivial. You must withdraw. Not a physical withdrawal into the woods, a mental withdrawal and emotional quarantine. You must become comfortable with being misunderstood. Fools will misinterpret your distance. They will call you arrogant. They will say you have changed. While they will assume your refusal to argue is a sign of weakness. Let them. Their judgment is based on a flawed premise. Why should the judgment of a flawed mind affect the peace of a sharp one? Imagine walking through an asylum. The patients point at you and call you crazy. Do you stop to debate them? Do you pull out a medical chart to prove your sanity? No. You keep walking. You understand their reality is distorted. The world is a much larger asylum, but the principle remains the exact same. When a fool insults you, it is not an insult. It is a misdiagnosis. When they reject your idea, it is not a failure.
Bonds rent.
It is a confirmation that your idea is beyond their reach. This level of detachment is not coldness, it is absolute clarity. It is the understanding that your energy is a finite resource, and every drop spent on someone committed to their own ignorance is a drop stolen from your own potential. We have spent centuries glorifying the debate.
Tintins.
We idolize the image of the intellectual warrior standing on a stage, dismantling their opponent with sharp logic and flawless rhetoric. But look closer at those debates. Nothing is ever resolved. The opponent never yields. The audience simply cheers for the side they already agreed with. It is theater. Many people treat every disagreement like a performance. It becomes a game played for applause rather than results. Those who think strategically focus on outcomes instead of recognition. If you want to become truly composed and effective, you must stop performing for approval. Think like an architect working in a noisy world. An architect does not ask every bystander for permission before laying the foundation. The work moves forward whether or not everyone understands the blueprint.
John.
This reflects one of the central themes in Schopenhauer's philosophy. Accept the world as it is before deciding how to act within it. Human beings are often guided more by emotion than reason, more by habit than truth. Complaining about that reality rarely changes it. Understanding it, however, allows you to navigate it with greater clarity and patience.
Bandesatinson sindan donson.
When you recognize that people are influenced by pride emotion and the desire for validation, you stop relying on logic alone. Instead, you communicate in ways that acknowledge those realities. You appeal to shared interests, respect emotional dynamics, and choose your words with intention. Influence is rarely about proving someone wrong. More often, it is about helping them arrive at a conclusion without triggering unnecessary resistance. That is the difference between intelligence and influence. Intelligence is knowing the correct answer. Influence is understanding that being right is not always enough. Real power comes from remaining calm, thinking strategically, and achieving meaningful outcomes without needing constant recognition for your insight. Intelligence is winning the argument. Power is winning the objective, while they think they won the argument. You clicked on this video because you were exhausted. You were tired of the constant friction, the endless circular conversations, the feeling that you were losing your mind trying to inject reason into an unreasonable world.
Marchim.
You thought the solution was a better argument, a sharper fact, a more persuasive tone. Now you know the truth. The solution is surrender, not surrendering to them, surrendering your need to change them. The moment you let go of the desire to be understood by people who are incapable of understanding the weight lifts, the exhaustion vanishes. You watch them speak, and instead of anger, you feel a calm clinical observation. You see the cognitive biases at play. You see the Dunning-Kruger effect in real time. You see the fragile ego defending itself. It becomes predictable, and what is predictable can be managed. Men, you are no longer a participant in their chaos. You are the observer of it. This is the therapeutic darkness. This is the cold, sharp reality that sets you free. You will never be hurt by a fool again because you will never again give them the authority to judge your reality. Your intellect is no longer a tool for their education.
Net.
It is a weapon for your own elevation. Keep it sharp, keep it hidden, and use it only when it serves your ascent. But realize this, the tactics we just discussed, the strategic incompetence, the manipulation of ego, the weaponization of absurdity, these are just the outer defenses. These are the tools you use to survive the masses. But what happens when you step past the masses? What happens when you encounter a mind that is not a fool, but a predator? A mind that sees your strategy and mirrors it back at you. The rules change entirely. The concepts that govern that level of psychological warfare are not meant for public consumption. They are too destabilizing. So as these ideas challenge the way most people think about influence perception and human behavior. If This discussion made you see the world from a different perspective. Remember that this is only the beginning. There are many more conversations about psychology, strategy, philosophy, and self-mastery that go far beyond what can fit into a single video. If you enjoyed this content and have not already subscribed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss future videos. And if you want to explore the deeper concepts behind human behavior, strategic thinking, and timeless philosophical insights, click the join button to become a channel member. You'll gain access to exclusive, members-only videos, extended discussions, and bonus content that dives even further into these topics. Most people will stop here. A few will choose to go deeper. The decision, as always, is yours.